Well, hello everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. I was sitting around thinking about how frustrating it can be a math teacher, how students are always focusing on what can I do to bring my grade up at the last second and all that kind of thing, and they seem to do it in a way that sort of tries to bypass any sort of learning or academic responsibility or anything like that. That combined with some of the things that were exposed, some of the shortcomings on our part that were exposed by school closures due to COVID. Putting all those things together, um, I wanted to start a conversation. I want to share some ideas and hear back from other people, and maybe we can put some things together and make some meaningful changes moving forward for next year. But if we never stop and pause and look back at what we did and how we can improve, what was exposed, what went well, what we can use moving forward, then we're just going to go back to the same old, which to me was unsatisfactory. So, anyway, here's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about how to potentially improve performances in math classes. So, these are some of the things that I've either developed on my own or mostly have stolen, but I had never put together in a way that was something that could be shared. So anyway, let's get to it. So first thing I would like to lay out is this principle that I subscribe to, and that is that if a solution is going to work, it has to address the root issue. So you can't just address the symptoms, because if all you do is address the symptoms, nothing's really going to change. So let's lay a few problems out here, and then let's get at the sources, and then we'll come up with some solutions, right? So the problem is, to me, that a significant portion, not all, but a significant portion of students, they don't really want to learn. They don't want to do the hard work. They're not willing participants. And if you're not a willing participant in your own education, you're not really going to have a successful outcome. Things are set up in a way that everybody can pass, but that doesn't mean that that's a meaningful, positive outcome for our students. So, that's the first idea. An observation is that if a student really deserved an F, but somehow or another, through extra credit, last minute late work, or whatever, got a C, they'd be 100% thrilled, and probably their parents would be too, right? Now, another observation. One of the things that we can do better with is that turnaround time between when students mess up and when they get the consequence of their poor behavior. This is going to make it a lot easier to redirect that behavior, you see, and we'll get into what that really is talking about here in just a second. And then last thing, I do believe that not just Algebra 1, but all levels of math that are offered at high school, the average person can be successful in all of those classes. So here's what we're going to get at. I think what we really need to do is we need to be coaching students on how they can learn better. And we need to make them understand that grades should be and are going to be a reflection of their knowledge and ability. And if with focus and intent we create a system that encompasses this approach, then we can better communicate that to the students, and they're going to not only just hear our words, but they're also going to see that, we mean it. This is how it is. So the first problem that we have is that students are largely apathetic about learning. We get this question towards the end of the quarter a lot. Mister, what can I do to bring my grade up? Or miss, depending on the situation, right? There's two things that are problematic in this, and both of them are our responsibility. So the first thing that we need to address is that we need to make sure that those students are feeling pressure to perform sooner. At the end, it's way too late, and that's largely our fault. The second thing we need to change is that we need to make sure that students are understanding that at the very last second, there's nothing they can do to bring their grade up, because their grade reflects what it is they know. They've had plenty of opportunities to demonstrate their knowledge and ability at this point, and so here at the end, it's all over but the crying, right? So last thing I would like to throw out, and this is a way that we can sometimes fix a situation without addressing the root cause. The situation that's presented is a poor grade. The root cause of the poor grade is actually poor performance. We can actually fix the grade in a way that reinforces students' misunderstanding about grades. So if we let them turn in their work at the last second, if we let them do extra credit, all those kinds of things, inappropriate quiz retakes, all those kinds of things, then we're reinforcing their misconception and their misunderstanding about grades. So we have to be careful though, because if we don't have, checkpoints in place between the beginning and the end of the quarter, then we're going to end up in a situation where students are learning a very hard lesson at the very end. So to help address that, we've got these two solutions. So the problem is students are apathetic towards learning, right? So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have assignments and assessments that have the appropriate rigor. So in other words, in order for students to perform well, they have to demonstrate appropriate learning. And then on the flip side, we have to give them the feedback as to how they've done immediately. They need to be asking that question, what can I do to bring my grade up, right away, at the end of week 1. If they're struggling, they need to know it right away. And if they do, that starts a whole new question, right? If a student comes to you at the beginning of week 2 and says, hey, what can I do to bring my grade up? Well, there's a really good opportunity there for them to improve as students. And the biggest gains they're going to make are going to be in how they perform as a student. How do they take questions, or how do they take notes? How do they perform in class? Are they, cognitively actively engaged? All those kinds of things. And so along those lines, the important questions should be, why didn't you get it? What we typically end up asking is, what is it you didn't understand? But if you've been teaching something for a while, you've probably got a pretty good delivery method down that is going to get 99.9% of students the first shot if they're really paying attention and are actively engaged. So really the why didn't you understand it is addressing what it is the student's bringing to the table. It's addressing their student skills, and that is where the most growth is going to occur. So that's it right there. Why didn't you understand it? So, maybe they're not taking good notes. Maybe they're missing a lot of work. Maybe they're super sleepy in class. Maybe they're disengaged. Maybe they're, trying to look on their phone. Maybe they're being a class clown for attention. Who knows? Whatever it is, if they're asking that question early, you can address those issues. So I believe that teaching math is actually pretty easy. The hard part about it is that students have to have good student skills in order to learn, and these are some of the things, not all of the things. These are some of the things required to be a good student. They've got to know how to study. They got to understand what it means when they're confused. They got to know how to respond to that. They have to know how to do homework properly, how to take notes properly. They know how to take academic risks, manage their time, all of those things. You see, if those things aren't in place, then the math, not just the math, any difficult subject is going to be almost out of reach for them until these things are in place. So our trick is to set up things so that students are becoming aware that they're underperforming very early, that performing means demonstration of knowledge and ability, and that the resolution to that issue is to resolve or improve all of these properties that you're seeing on the screen right now. So let's talk about a few practical steps, how we can set this up. These are the things I'm going to be trying this year, and most of them are already done. So I've done in the past, but there are a few little tweaks that I'd like to share. So daily homework. The homework needs to be appropriate. Can't be busy work. That's when students are really starting to learn. No late work, because if they're doing late work, they're probably rushing it. You can't rush learning, right? Homework is reviewed in depth for understanding, and there are twice weekly, so Tuesday and Thursday, there are going to be these mini quizzes that are maybe 5 minutes long, kind of like bell work, and those questions come directly from the homework. They can be, by directly, I mean they might be the same exact problem, they might be of the same ilk, the changing some numbers around, but very, very similar. Those mini quizzes are graded and returned immediately. So this does two things. Number one, it does provide students a way to test themselves, see how they're doing. It also provides, so that's the carrot, but it also has a little bit of a stick because there's a grade associated with it, right? And here's the deal though, because everybody can have a bad day. You can be doing a great job as a student and something's just elusive for you. So what I'm going to be doing this year is each of these mini quizzes can be retaken. It'll be a different quiz, but they can do a replacement quiz. They have 1 week's time to do it, but the second attempt score, that's the one that counts. This prevents, hopefully, students from just randomly retaking things without actually going back and reviewing what it is they've done. Now, at the end of the week, there's a weekly quiz. The majority of that quiz is going to be based on what's been learned that week, but it's important to not be too focused on just that week, and to also include other questions from the past. Helps with recall, helps with connectivity of concepts, all those kinds of things, right? No notes, they have to be timed. And the reason those are both very important is because if we're preparing students to, for the future, so for example, let's say they're going to be college bound, they're going to have to take ACT, SAT, the number one issue for our current seniors, upon interviewing them anyway, on the ACT, is they ran out of time. They weren't fast enough. So we've got to get them ready, and so timing our tests, no extra time, no notes, and no retakes on quizzes, I think is very appropriate. Now, of course, everybody can make their own decisions on how to do this, but this is what I'm putting forth. But I do agree, I do believe very strongly that feedback on that quiz needs to be super fast. Those quizzes have to be turned around quickly, because if there's a situation to be addressed, the awareness that the student has of their own behavior that led to that poor performance, that memory has a short half-life. That thing's going to go away quick. So we need to get them aware of what it is they're doing and what it leads to. And the only way to do that is to give those quizzes back super fast, right? And when we do that, then we can really focus on coaching those students on their student skills, because that's going to help promote future success. And then, of course, we have tests, right? A couple ideas here. Help students learn how to design their own study guide. And of course, on a test, no extra time, no retakes, no notes. Those are kind of like autopsies, right? So now, how do we support these steps? Well, first thing is we got to make sure our homework is meaningful. Can't be busy work, can't be too overwhelming on time. If the problems are difficult, only a few. If the problems are easy, say like they're learning to distribute binomials, because that's key for factoring, maybe there's quite a bit, but be conscious of time, and most of the time it's not. It can't be busy work, and most of the time it shouldn't just be repetition. Once in a while is okay, but anyway. One great idea that we should coach our students on is when they're doing their homework, they need to leave a lot of space, because when they review, they're going to take notes over their homework. And if they are stuck on a question or a problem, they need to write a question in their notes on their homework. And they need to ask that question either before school or of another student. They need to do some research or ask you independently. And they need to go back and record that answer. So that's that homework. That approach to homework will really help students to learn from the homework. Now, the mini quizzes, these are important because it's the first chance for them to demonstrate their knowledge, and that quick feedback really does help students find their way, right? And then the weekly quizzes, those are the big deal to me. That's actually where most of it happens. If students are doing well on weekly quizzes, the tests, they generally seem to take care of themselves. The quiz is payday. That's their chance to earn their grade. If they've been lazy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, their quiz is going to be terrible. If they've done a good job all week, the quiz is going to be great. If they have a string of great quizzes, the tests, they're going to be fantastic. So anyway, we're setting up all these things so that we don't just have the rug pulled out of underneath the students at the very end. So that's kind of how we have this all set up. So here's how the system kind of works, right? We've got instruction that leads to homework. We have homework review. Then we have our mini quizzes, and then we have our quizzes, and then that leads to our tests in the middle. But the whole thing's cyclical. So for instruction, we need to make sure that our students are cognitively actively engaged. That means that they are taking good notes, which doesn't mean they're writing everything down. They're writing down big ideas, they're writing down realizations, they're writing down predictions, and of course, most importantly, questions. Big idea here. I do not believe that, at least not from my level of instruction, I don't believe that instruction develops proficiency. If you're teaching students how to do math step by step, then maybe it does, but that's not proficiency. That's just that's copying. That's just reflecting. That's mimicking. That's not a real understanding. What instruction does is it provides access to the tools that the students are going to be required to have familiarity with and can appropriately use. And the only way that they get to proficiency is through practice, experience, and further exposure. And that's what the homework provides, not the instruction. Now, that said, let's talk about homework. Homework is where they begin to develop that proficiency. A really bright student, homework, that's all they need. They're going to realize their own confusion. They're going to fix it on their own, no problem. But that confusion is going to occur if the homework's appropriate. Not on every problem, but there needs to be something that exposes common misconceptions. So you need to make sure you have those things in your homework. The thing that students should be coached on is that confusion is the doorway to understanding. You don't get to go from ignorant to completely knowledgeable without working through misconceptions and confusion, which also, of course, lead to frustration. So students need to be trained on how all of that works. Now, one thing that some of my really highly successful students that weren't necessarily gifted in math have adopted is this method of writing questions in their notes and then marking those questions with a sticky pad. So as they're going through their homework, they are very specific in their questions when they're confused. They don't say, I don't get it, or I don't know how to do this, or I'm confused by this. Those are statements, not questions. They have to write a very specific question and not, how do I do this? They have to write a very specific question that gets at the root of what it is that's confusing them. And then their job moving forward is to make sure they answer all those questions. They have to record the answers to those questions by the questions, and when they do so, they remove the sticky note. When it's all said and done, students with no sticky notes, they're well prepared. All right. Now, I believe personally that when you're reviewing homework, that's when the majority of the learning occurs, because that's where you can tease out all of these misconceptions and all these misunderstandings. And it's often the case that students can be completely ignorant of a misconception. They can actually get everything right on a homework and do it themselves and somehow create a system that works for those problems but doesn't always work. So they have some misconceptions that they've created that can be exposed when you start discussing about other students' misconceptions. So that conversation about homework, super important, and it's really important, to me anyway, that when you're reviewing homework, you're coaching those student skills and how to engage in homework and the purpose of it. If they're doing all of that, then the mini quizzes are going to be great. And if they're not doing all of that, that mini quiz is a real quick, early, hey, wake up call. Like, hey, this is not going right. We need to adjust this because you're on the wrong path. This is just a warning sign that says, hey, we got to fix some things, and it gives students a chance to fix those things. I would suggest that if you do the mini quiz and you do the retake on the mini quiz, that you require students to meet with you one-on-one individually, not between classes, because that's a rushed situation, but a time where you can really sit down and speak with them about your observations about their student skills, maybe helping them to reflect on how it is that they're behaving in class, what it is that they're not doing well, what it is they could do better with, what are their strengths that might lend or lead them towards greater success, what are some of their characteristics or attributes that might be causing them to struggle that they need to work on, shoring up or limiting. And then when they do that retest, of course, the second score is the one that sticks, even if it's lower. I think that's very important, because that motivates them to really learn, not just retake the quiz. And the quizzes, they have to be different problems. They can't be the same ones. All right, now on to our quizzes. If students have really done well all week, they've done well on their homework, they're being good students, the quizzes are going to be no problem. They shouldn't be hundreds, because if the students are getting hundreds, then there's nothing to learn from the quiz, and this quiz still is informative. Students should really come away with a deeper understanding of where they're at. If they want to be, if a student wants to be at level A, and the quiz shows that they're a level A, but the quiz really isn't as hard as it should have been, there's nowhere to grow. But if a student wants to be here and they take the quiz and they realize they're at C level, well, all they've got to do is they've got to do some work. There's some things they need to change, and the quiz should inform them of what those changes need to be and how to go about them. So then when that's all done, we lead to the test. The test is like the autopsy, right? It's a reflection of everything that's been done up to that point, and there should be no surprises on test day. So let's put this all together, right? So our job is to set up an appropriate standard. So if we're talking about Algebra 1, that would mean we're using the ACT standards, the ones that are appropriately college-bound, for college-bound students for high school level, not the things, I think that's like level 4 or 500 or up. I don't remember off the top of my head. But setting those up, if you're teaching, an AP class, then the level of rigor needs to match what's required to pass that AP test, so on and so forth, right? We need to communicate that standard. We have to do that through feedback. It has to be through lots of conversation. This is where you should be. This is where you are now. These are the steps you can take to get there. We also need to make sure that our students have easy access to the content. Our job is to provide that. Our job isn't to learn for them. We're just we're showing them the path of what they can follow to, gain access to the information. And then why is way more important than what when you're talking about helping students to improve. We need to discuss why it is they struggle. The math itself is not the problem. The math itself is not the problem. The student skills are the problem. So we got to help them improve those student skills. So we've got to make sure that our grades reflect learning, and then we've got to make sure that we're coaching our students on how to improve their learning skills, their learning tools, their student skills, because that's what's going to translate outside of class. So now a quick word on, this part right here: clear, organized, easy to use. So I have created an entire year's kind of calendar of what we're going to be doing and when. And you can see a copy of that here. It's going to be posted in Google Classroom. So for each day, it has what it is we're doing, maybe a quick note. That's more for me than for the students. And it'll have links for the PowerPoint. If I have notes that are typed up, they'll be there. A short video, maybe some additional practice if I can find some, like Khan Academy or whatever. The assignment and the answer key. So all of that's there, and students will be able to interact with this and click on the links and whatever. So here's what I'm going to suggest. All of this involved, all of this pulled together in action steps, if you would, right? I hate that word, action steps. Anyway, first thing, set up a calendar. Some way that you can communicate with the students and their parents what it is that they're going to be expected to know. I'm going to be posting short videos that contain problems that are going to appear in those mini quizzes. Those short videos can be used by students to review and refresh their memory. And when they do poorly on a mini quiz, that's going to be one of the first questions. Did you look at those videos? Because if you did, you're going to be all right. If you didn't, this is the result, right? So then we're also going to teach students that in-class instruction is where we're giving them the tools, but when they're doing their homework, that's when they're learning how to use them. Right? So we got to coach them on how to engage in class appropriately, what everything means, how it all fits together. We have to teach them how to do homework properly, how to use it to actually learn. We have to review homework correctly, which means, we have to review homework. I said correctly, and I guess that's maybe appropriate, but what I mean is we have to review it in a way we're really helping students to not just understand the content, but also to develop as students so they can understand the content more quickly and they can recall it more accurately. So we're going to do those mini assessments. That feedback, even if you don't use an assessment, has to be quick. And then one thing I would say with whatever it is that you use for remediation, got to be tracking how students improve on their first attempts for those little checkpoints. Because if they're not improving from 1 week to the next, like if their score isn't gradually going up, if their trajectory isn't a positive one, then time's being wasted. Wheels are spinning and nothing good is coming out of it. So it'd be time to revisit and dig a little deeper. That turnaround, though, has to be super, super fast. Quizzes and assessments and homework, that feedback needs to be quick, because that's the only way that students are going to connect the dots between their behaviors and the end results of learning or not learning, if as the case might be. Then we got to coach them. Got to coach them on how to be good students, because that good student skill is exactly what's going to translate. So anyway, man, that was a lot. That's what I got to share. I don't know how that's all going to go. It's going to be a lot of work to set up, but I think once it's set up, you can really focus on dealing with students, helping them to become better students, and the results will follow. So those are my thoughts. I'd like to hear what you think. How does this resonate? Does it seem off the mark? Do you have something that's easier, that addresses the same issues? I don't know. Anyway, hope you guys are having a good day, and hope to see you soon.